So could you actually retire in Koh Samui? Not could you have an amazing 2 week holiday here. Anyone can do that. I'm talking about actually living here, waking up here every day, growing old here. I get asked this all the time. People message me from the UK, the States, Australia, all asking the same thing. George, we're thinking about Samui. Is it right for us? And here's the honest answer. For some of you, yes, Samui could be one of the best decisions you ever make. But for others, and I mean this kindly, it would be an expensive mistake. I've lived in Thailand for years now, and I've watched Samui change over the years. I've seen retirees arrive full of excitement, and I've seen some quietly leave a year or two later. So what happened? That's exactly what we're going to cover today. I'm not here to sell you Samui. I'm going to show you the good, the bad, and the things no one tells you before they move here. By the end of this video, you'll know whether Koh Samui is genuinely the right place for your retirement, or whether somewhere like Hua Hin or Chiang Mai would actually suit you better. Let's get into it. Koh Samui sits in the Gulf of Thailand, off Thailand's east coast. It's Thailand's third largest island, and unlike Phuket, there's no bridge connecting it to the mainland. If you want to get here, you either fly or take the ferry. That might not sound like a big deal, but it does affect what it's like living here, and we'll come back to that later. The first thing I noticed was just how big the island felt than I remembered. I'd expected somewhere fairly small, but it actually takes a while to drive around, and there are busy towns, shopping centres, supermarkets, hospitals, and pretty much everything you need for day-to-day life. The atmosphere is relaxed, but don't mistake that for quiet. Places like Chaweng can be busy, especially during the day and in the evenings. While other parts of the island are much more peaceful, it really depends where you choose to live. So who actually retires here? From what I've seen, it's a real mix. You get couples looking for sunshine and beach lifestyle, single retirees who enjoy having an established international community, and plenty of people who first came here on a holiday, fell in love with the island, then came back a few years later with a one-way ticket. But living on an island is different from living on the mainland. Most of the time you have everything you need right here. But whenever you want to leave, you're looking at booking a flight or catching a ferry. That's not a huge problem, but it does make life a little less flexible from somewhere like Hua Hin or Pattaya, where you can simply get in the car and drive. So before you start comparing house prices or working out your monthly budget, ask yourself one simple question. Would you actually enjoy living on an island? Not just for a week's holiday, living here year after year. Because for some people, that's exactly what makes Koh Samui special. For others, it's the reason they eventually decide it's not right for them. Let's talk about what people love about Koh Samui and what they don't. The beaches really are stunning. Chaweng, Lamai and the quieter beaches in the north all have their own character. But that beauty comes at a price. Beachfront property costs noticeably more than living inland, and generally more than somewhere like Hua Hin. One thing that surprised me when I visited was just how busy some parts of the island were. Before going back, I had this image of this quiet tropical island, but around places like Chaweng and Lamai, there is a lot more going on than many people expect. There are restaurants, bars, traffic and plenty of tourists, even in the low season, especially around the main areas. The relaxed lifestyle is a huge attraction. If you enjoy beaches, sunsets and being outdoors, it's easy to see why so many retirees fall in love with the island. But it's definitely not for everyone. After the honeymoon period, some people realise they're looking for a bit more variety. The food scene is another big plus. From fantastic local seafood to Italian, French and plenty of familiar Western favourites. There's no shortage of choice. Just bear in mind that eating out regularly, especially in the tourist spots, costs more than it does in many other parts of Thailand. One of Samui's biggest strengths is its international community. There are plenty of expats here, so it's easy to meet people and settle in. The flip side is that parts of the island feel a little less traditional Thai than places like Chiang Mai or some mainland towns. Now for some of the downsides. Everyday living generally costs more than on the mainland, and traffic, particularly around Chaweng, has become noticeably busier over the years. None of these are deal breakers. They just mean Koh Samui suits some retirees better than others. The key is knowing exactly what you're signing up for before you make the move. This is probably the question I get asked more than any other. Where should you actually live on Koh Samui? The honest answer is, it depends on what sort of retirement you want. If you like being in the middle of everything, Chaweng is the island's busiest area. Restaurants, shopping, nightlife, plenty going on from morning until late night. Some people love that atmosphere. Personally, if I was retiring, I'd probably want somewhere a little quieter. That's when Lamai comes in. It's still lively enough to have plenty of restaurants, cafes and shops, but it feels a bit more relaxed than Chaweng. For a lot of people, it offers a nice balance between convenience and a quieter lifestyle. This area below is one area I think really stood out for me, especially around Fisherman's Village. It's full of character with great restaurants, cafes, boutique shops and a really nice atmosphere, especially in the evenings. It feels a little more upmarket without being over the top, and I can see why so many retirees choose to live nearby. If on the other hand you're looking for somewhere quieter and a little more traditional, head over towards the west coast. There are fewer tourists, a slower pace of life, and parts of the island still feel much more local. The trade-off is that you're further from many of the bigger shops and facilities. Whichever part of Koh Samui you choose, one thing quickly becomes obvious. Having your own transport makes life much easier. The island is bigger than many people expect, and while taxis are available, they're not always the most practical or the cheapest option. At the end of the day, choosing where to live isn't really about picking the best area. It's about finding the one that suits the lifestyle you want. Let's talk about money. Now, if you've watched any videos about Koh Samui, you've probably already heard one thing. It's expensive. And compared to places like Hua Hin or Pattaya, that's true. But here's what surprised me. It isn't expensive everywhere. Where you choose to live, shop and eat makes a huge difference. Around Chaweng and the main tourist areas, prices can be much higher. Restaurants, cafes and even getting around the island all cost more. I jumped onto one of the song towers expecting to pay mainland prices, and instead it was around 150 baht. That's a good example of how costs can catch you out. Move away from the tourist hotspots though, and it's a different story. We found much more local areas where prices dropped, the atmosphere changed, and you could see how many Thai families actually live day to day. Housing works the same way. If you want to rent close to the beach or in one of the more popular areas, you'll pay a premium. But move a little further inland or into a quieter neighbourhood and there are still some very good deals to be found on the island. The same goes for food. Eat in tourist restaurants every night and your budget disappears surprisingly quickly. But if you're happy eating where the locals eat, or shopping at local markets, you can still live very reasonably. So yes, Koh Samui is one of the more expensive places to retire in Thailand. I'd put it in the same sort of bracket as Phuket, and definitely above places like Hua Hin or Pattaya. But don't make the mistake of thinking the whole island is expensive. It isn't. You just need to know where to look, and that's probably the biggest lesson I came away with after spending time here. Healthcare is another question that comes up all the time. The good news is that Koh Samui has good private healthcare. Bangkok Hospital Samui is the main international hospital on the island, and it's the one many expats choose. There are also smaller clinics for everyday medical needs, and if you're an English speaker, getting treatment generally isn't difficult. If you ever need highly specialised treatment though, Bangkok still offers the widest choice of hospitals and specialists in Thailand. It's just something worth keeping in mind before deciding where to retire. I'd also recommend having good health insurance. Medical care in Thailand is excellent, but private treatment isn't free, so it's much better to have that peace of mind before you need it. For day-to-day healthcare though, I think most retirees will find Koh Samui has everything they need. One thing that surprised me was just how big Koh Samui feels once you're actually driving around the island. It's not an island where you can easily walk everywhere. So for most retirees, having your own transport makes life much easier. There are songtaos, taxis and Grab, but they can be expensive if you're relying on them every day. I jumped into one of the red songtaos expecting mainland prices and end up paying around 150 baht. That's fine occasionally, but it soon adds up if you're using it regularly. So for most people, it's really a choice between a car and a motorbike. Personally, I think a car is the safer option, especially for retirees. It's more comfortable, gives you protection from the heat and the rain, and it's ideal if you're doing the weekly shop or heading across the island. That said, one thing that really caught me out was the parking. Around some of the busier areas, finding somewhere to leave the car could be surprisingly frustrating, and some of the roads are pretty narrow. It's easy to see why so many people choose motorbikes instead. They're simply easier to park and much easier to squeeze through traffic. If you do decide a motorbike is for you, just be honest with your experience. Koh Samui's roads can be busy, they're steep in places, and you regularly hear about tourists having accidents because they're simply not used to riding in Thailand. For me, that's one of the biggest things to think about before retiring here. How are you actually going to get around every day? Because once you've got that sorted, life on Samui becomes a whole lot easier. So what's everyday life on Koh Samui actually like? Well, after the excitement of moving here wears off, life settles into a pretty normal routine. You probably do your shopping at places like Lotus, Big C or Macro, while the local markets are the best places to pick up fresh fruit, vegetables and seafood. If you're happy buying local produce, your money goes a lot further. One thing I really noticed is that there's no shortage of cafes. Whether you fancy a simple Thai coffee or a proper cappuccino, you're spoiled for choice. The same goes for restaurants. You could eat somewhere different every day if you wanted to. If you like keeping active, there's plenty to do. Gyms, golf, water sports, and of course some fantastic beaches. Or you can simply grab a coffee, go for a walk and enjoy the island at your own pace. Another thing Koh Samui does really well is the social side of retirement. There's a large expat community along with plenty of Facebook groups, clubs and regular meetups. Whether you're into golf, fitness, diving or just fancy meeting people for a coffee, there are lots of opportunity to build a social circle. Of course, not everyone stays forever. Some people move on after a year or two, so you'll always find people coming and going. But overall, I'd say Koh Samui is one of the easier places in Thailand to meet people and make friends. One last thing to think about is the weather. For much of the year, Samui is exactly what you'd expect: warm, sunny and tropical. But unlike much of Thailand, the island's wettest months are generally towards the end of the year. So don't assume the seasons are exactly the same as places like Phuket or Hua Hin. When it rains, it can really rain. Most days are absolutely fine, but during the wetter months, you can get some heavy downpours and the occasional local flooding. Overall, everyday life on Samui is comfortable, relaxed and easy. If that sounds like your idea of retirement, it's easy to see why so many people choose to call the island home. Before I wrap this up today, there are a few things people don't always tell you about living on Samui. The first is that it's still a busy, growing island. Traffic can be surprisingly heavy in places like Chiang, especially during the high season. And if you live close to the airport, it's worth checking how much aircraft noise there is before signing a long-term lease. Like anywhere in tropical Thailand, mosquitoes are just part of life here, especially after heavy rain, so that's something you need to get used to. And then there are the little things that gradually add to your monthly budget. Imported products cost more. Many services are more expensive than on the mainland. And because everything comes onto the island by boat or plane, that's unlikely to change anytime soon. One final thing to think about is leaving the island. Whether it's visiting family, heading to Bangkok for an appointment, or simply fancying a weekend away, you're always relying on a flight or a ferry. For some people that's no issue at all. For others it's one of the biggest downsides of island life. So who is Koh Samui really for? I think you'll love it if you enjoy being by the sea, want an active social life, don't mind spending a little more for a fantastic lifestyle, and genuinely like the idea of living on an island. On the other hand, if you're on a very tight retirement budget, don't enjoy driving, or want the convenience of being able to travel around Thailand by car whenever you like, I'd probably look at somewhere like Hua Hin instead. And if beaches aren't your thing, and you'd rather be surrounded by mountains, culture and cooler weather, then Chiang Mai could be a better fit. And at the end of the day, there's no perfect place to retire. There's only the place that suits you best. So could you retire in Koh Samui in 2026? Absolutely. For the right person, I think it's one of Thailand's best retirement destinations. You've got beautiful beaches, a fantastic choice of restaurants and cafes, a large international community, good healthcare, and a relaxed island lifestyle that's easy to fall in love with. But it isn't the cheapest place to retire, and island living isn't for everyone. That's why I always recommend visiting for a few weeks before you make the move. Experience everyday life, not just the holiday version. If it feels right, I think Koh Samui could be an amazing place to spend your retirement. Just do me a massive favour, if you enjoyed today's video, just press that subscribe button, it's free on the channel, and drop a comment down below. Thanks for watching guys, I'll see you on the next one.